Welcome to another Game of Thrones discussion. My name is Brian McBalls, joined with Jordan Wade.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
And yeah, we're here to talk Game of Thrones again. This time we're talking Season 5, Episode 6, Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, the Martell Words. And yeah, sorry we were out last week. I had the flu. I'm still kind of fighting it off a little bit, but feeling good enough to record today. So, yeah, if you haven't seen Season 5, Episode 6 of Game of Thrones, you might want to turn away. We're going to be spoiling the episode and comparing to similar book events. So, if you plan on reading the books and have not yet, you might want to back out. And, yeah, without further ado, let's dive right in. And why don't we start with King's Landing, Jordan? Why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, this week we return to King's Landing after a bit of an absence last week. We have the Queen of Thorns arrive. It's the first time we've seen Lady Tyrell in a while since last season, so it was a welcome reintroduction to her, and we have a interesting sit down between her and Cersei. Um, this this everybody is thoroughly enjoyed this exchange this past week, just because. It's Diana Rigg, right, that plays Lady Tyrell, I believe. She's just such a great actress, and to see her work against see her character work against Cersei is always fun. But what I enjoyed the most was seeing Cersei kind of act like her dad in that scene. You know, like she's trying to do her best Tywin impression by sitting there, writing something which we obviously know is nothing, and Lady Tyrell just call her out on that. But there's sort of just back and forth, and the tensions are rising between the two families. It's no secret that Cersei doesn't care for the Tyrells, but it is Lady Tyrell is quick to point out that it's the Tyrells that are propping up this kingdom. It's their money, it's their resources. They are now pretty much the structural backbone for King's Landing, and kind of basically saying that Cersei needs to tread lightly with what she's doing. But Cersei is not threatened. She hasn't backed down. I mean, Lady Tyrell doesn't like that her grandson is in prison, but Cersei's using the same excuse she's used the past week. Last time we saw her is that, hey, it's not me. It's the High Sparrows. I'm not in charge of them. And yeah, so you're seeing this sort of it's this confrontation, and it's interesting to me just because Cersei wants power and stuff like that, but it does seem sort of odd that she is challenging the Tyrells, because the fact is they are propping up the kingdom. Is this similar how it plays out in the books, Brian?
Yeah, it is. There's a Tyrell Lannister conflict, and it's very similar. That it's passive aggressive. I guess Cersei sees a threat that Marjorie has such control over Tommen, and that she fears that Marjorie will do what Cersei has been doing, is manipulate the king to get what she wants. And so while they do need the Tyrells, Cersei is very intent on keeping the Lannisters at the top of the food chain there. And so she has to pull off this very passive aggressive, I guess, political maneuvers just to try and keep the Tyrells down without officially, declaring war.
Yeah.
Obviously, it plays out a lot different in the books, but I mean, it's similar. It's very similar though. As far as they're like I said, passive aggressive political exchanges going on. And this whole thing with the sparrows, I guess that's taken off too. They have a little trial for Loras.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to say I did enjoy the exchange, but I felt like we just sort of just sprinted to this trial. Like it seemed like there was really no buildup. And granted, we don't need another episode in between to sort of delay this buildup or anything like that, to prolong the buildup, I should say. But it does seem like we just went from discussion to bang trial, and the trial is pretty quick. But yeah, and it kind of goes. This is interesting because as we've discussed in the past, Loras's character is quite a bit different than he is in the books. Does a trial? How do you feel about the trial playing out in the show?
Loras isn't incriminated in the books. I mean, his homosexuality is always kind of left just as a background detail. It's not like brought to the public attention, and he's not put on trial for it. It's actually Marjorie that's put on trial. Cersei uses the faith to try and find a way to incriminate Marjorie, and I guess they found it's a very kind of complicated way that was done in the books. So I think they instead used Loras's homosexuality as a conduit to get to Marjorie, which is the important part. Is Marjorie is in prison now. She or she implicated herself by lying for Loras, pretty much.
Yeah, and it puts Tom in obviously in an interesting predicament. But I'm still having. I understand the Sparrows hold a lot of the faith holds a great deal of power, but I don't understand where the checks and balances are at. You would think that Tommen being the king can just be like, "Hey, no, I'm the king. My final say is that my wife is not to be imprisoned." But then again, I guess if his men are not going to battle the faith for that power, then I guess he's powerless to even force that. But it's interesting to see. We do continue to see Tommen just sort of confused and caught in between everything and not wanting it to play out this way, but he's an innocent bystander. He's kind of have to sit there and watch it just all unravel in front of him.
Yeah, he's totally unprepared for it, and it's kind of interesting the way they're playing this out because in the books, it's more or less. I want to say this now is that Cersei's chapters prove that she is too paranoid to be a ruler, and she makes mistakes because she's being too paranoid, and I don't think the show is taking it that way. Like, so to give you context, she brought back the Faith Militant, and the same thing happened in the books. She brought back the Faith Militant. What she didn't know was what that entitled the Church of the Seven, the Sept, to have power to, which is these kind of trials against the the uh, the ruling class. So inadvertently, she brings this down upon the queen, Marjorie, and all these different people that the sparrows go after. It was inadvertent. She made a mistake because she was just being paranoid. And the way they played out in the book or in the show, it makes it seem like Cersei kind of knew this would happen. Like she knew that the Faith Militant would start poking around, and didn't she in an earlier episode kind of point them towards Loras somehow? Yeah, because she's sitting with the sparrow and she's like, "What if I told you that someone in the royal court is living a life of lust and sin?" And
Yeah.
she kind of points them in that direction. They're making her seem more intelligent in the show. But I mean, it's interesting. Like the church. I'm going to bring this up because I mean, it's something that's already been shown, but I don't think a lot of people remember it. I mean, we know that Lancel's back. He's a faith militant. Now, do you remember the extent of Lancel and Cersei's relationship?
I know that he was the sort of the surrogate for Jaime in the time that Jaime was away. He was basically just the physical form of what Cersei needed out of Jaime.
Mm-hmm. So, knowing that and what he is now, I mean, think about what he has over her right now and what could happen. So, I'm just going to put that out there because I don't think a lot of people think of that with how things went down with Loras and Marjorie, and like all this ammo that Lancel has over Cersei.
That is interesting. But if you were to bring it up, could that be positioned against him, or because he's part of the Sparrows, they could say, "Oh, I don't know. I guess we'd have to see it play out." But you would think that would be a double-edged sword for him, because in the process of getting Cersei, he'd be getting himself. But maybe because he's part of the High Sparrows, and maybe it's a repentance for what he's done in the past.
Yeah, I want to see like how it's addressed, or even if they use that, because I feel like that scene was put in there intentionally. Um, so we'll see. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
It
I
is a
want, I
good
want,
way. It is a good way to bring in a paranoid Cersei into the process, though. I mean, because if she believes that Lancel could use that against her, then you have the paranoid Cersei.
Yep. So, I mean, also Littlefinger returns and he's confronted by the Sparrows. Um, he kind of eludes them with his. He's pretty good at getting out of confrontations, and so they were trying to confront him about his brothels. And what did he say to get out of it? I'm trying to remember.
It was something about oh man, I forget the quote. It was the
Uh,
business is
I think
I yeah.
the Queen Mother was waiting for him or something, and they did that she didn't want to be delayed or something.
Yeah, man, I wish I could remember the quote, but he did say something clever in the process. I do want to bring up something though. How is it that Littlefinger can get from Winterfell to King's Landing within one, with one episode in between? Yet it's going to take Stannis like episodes to march to Winterfell. It just seems that the timelines in this season are a little weird. Just being that he got there pretty quick. I mean, granted, his party is smaller that's traveling, but Cersei had said in the past there's like a thousand miles in between King's Landing and Winterfell. So
Oh yeah,
traveling a thousand miles in what I would assume would be a week or something like that seems a little unrealistic.
yeah. The show does that kind of frequently with the distances. I don't feel like they really account for it too much. Like, I mean, Littlefinger famously did it in season 2, where he hopped between King's Landing, Harrenhal, and Storm's End. Like, he hopped between those three places within a matter of like 3 or 4 episodes. So he's always hopping the country, and I don't know. I don't know if he's just got quick travel or what. Like, but
Yeah, I think it's because as time goes on, and someone like me familiarizes myself with the map. It becomes more obvious the hopping between. Like season 2, those distances may have not been as evident to me as they are now.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and so knowing the distance between Winterfell and King's Landing now, it was kind of jarring to see him get there that quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of an oversight. Maybe they just want to move the show forward. But you're right. It doesn't make sense that Stannis has taken like several episodes to reach Winterfell, which is much closer to the wall than Winterfell is to King's Landing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just chalk it up to a television show being a television show, and it's something I can forgive. But it's just one of those things that I found kind of funny.
Yeah, it's definitely a little inconsistency. So yeah, I mean, King's Landing overall, like I'm waiting to see how it pans out. I haven't given up on that plot line yet. There's some things I think that are weak about it, but overall, I mean, it's kind of up there as far as what I'm interested in this season. You want to move on to?
Before we do, I just want to say, Cersei does ask Littlefinger if he'd be willing to. Well, she borderline demands that they will need the forces of the Vale. And Littlefinger kind of lays out his plan on his master plan on what he plans to do, and it makes sense. Uh, but she also demands that uh, Sansa's head be posted on a stick, and that was interesting to me. Littlefinger has shown a lot of care towards Sansa, but I think he could be the type to just backstab her just for the sake of power. But it also calls into question what his end game really is. I think the writing on the wall is that he wants the North, but it just seems sort of odd that that's all he'd be content with, because you could see like, oh yeah, I pledged the Vale to the crown, but I'm going to wait till Stannis and Bolt and House Bolton just beat the crap out of each other, and then I'll move in and beat down whoever's left after they're wounded and fatigued.
I
But
like it. I like his wording though. He didn't straight up say that I support the crown, because she was like, "Can we expect the Vale? Can we expect the support of the Vale?" And he goes, "Well, Lord Robert does listen to me, and I have in the past," or he said something like, "I have in the past counseled loyalty to the throne." So he didn't like specifically say he would support it. He basically said in the past he had done it.
it
So
was. Yeah, it was a convenient little sidestep there. That was you would think that Cersei would be quick to catch on to that, but she probably knew that was the most she was going to get out of him in that moment.
And I mean, Littlefinger's played loyal up until this point. So I mean, I really just think he's biding his time. Like you said, he wants to see who comes out on top in the North, and maybe he'll make his decision then on what the best play is. Um, but yeah, in what you said about Sansa, I don't know about show Baelish. I feel like Book Baelish would do anything to keep Sansa safe. Like Book Baelish is obsessed with Sansa. Like to him, I think that's what represents what he always wanted in life was basically Catelyn,
Yeah.
like the spitting image of Caitlyn. And that's another thing that bothers me is I don't think Baelish would ever give up Sansa's virginity. Like he wouldn't put her in that position. I don't think. So that makes me question if you what you're saying is correct is that Show Baelish doesn't care about Sansa. He just uses her.
Yeah, she's just a pawn for him to play with and nothing more.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a difference too. So I agree with that. I think it'll be interesting to see what his motives are in the next few weeks.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be interesting to see what comes of Mr. Baelish.
Oh yeah. And yeah, let's move on. We got Arya at the House of Black and White, continuing her faceless man duties. What's your opinion on this whole segment here?
Okay, Brian, I know you love Arya a lot. You enjoy that character very much. You're always rooting for the character, and I can appreciate that. Um, but I was bored to death this week.
Yeah.
I was bored to death. Uh, I think it's because the payoff was something I had predicted from the moment she got there. And in fact, I was kind of shocked that the payoff was what it was. Uh, Again, this episode, we see her attending to the dead, cleaning the bodies, and also again with the no one, someone sort of thing. I did like the scene between her and Jaqen where he's whipping her because he's basically calling out her lies, and I appreciated that scene because that was interesting just because it's a training scene, so I enjoy training scenes, especially when you can tell that a guy who's so experienced can call her ticks and stuff like that. She like grab her arm or something like that, or she do something in the process of lying,
Yeah.
and that was interesting.
I like the fact that he called a lie that she hates Sandor Clegane because she doesn't truly hate him,
I,
and he noticed that was a lie. I like that a lot.
I did too, and that was a nice moment, just because it sort of answers a question about where Arya left the Hound when we last saw him dying, and she refused to kill him. We didn't know if she refused to kill him out of spite or if she refused to kill him out of the fact that she just couldn't bring herself to do it, and that was sort of a nice nod to that. She did care for him. He was a mentor to her in a strange way, and that was pretty cool because he whipped her a few times as she was trying to lie that she hated him. Uh, but then we have this scene where a father brings his dying daughter to as a friend of mine called it, the cyanide well. And this scene didn't really work for me, just because I think it was showing that Arya could become someone she's not, but it wasn't. I don't know. It didn't. It seemed a little forced and didn't seem natural and it just seemed so quick from her training, from that training scene. So it didn't really work for me. I understood. I believe we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this on here, but you had said that the House of Black and White is made up of guys who will kill others for people, but the people also or also ask for death from the House of Black and White if they're desiring it. Like this girl is in complete pain. Her father has tried to do everything he could to help her, but it's beyond help at this point.
Yeah, their first mission was actually just mercy killings. They were the Faceless Men started in the mines of Valyria, and people would be dying from the fumes and what have you in the mines. And the Faceless Men they started by a guy who started giving mercy killings to those who asked for it. And so before they were even into assassinry, they were mercy killers. And so I guess that's what that whole scene is to show is that Arya does her first mercy killing, and I guess Jaken liked the way she handled it, and yeah, I mean, I can't say I was particularly like impressed with the scene or anything. I don't think it's from the books at all. Uh, I mean, a lot of the Faceless Man stuff's quite different in the books, and it's really hard to compare, to be honest, because it's long sections that it would be hard to really compare, I guess.
Sure, I feel like there's more to it, but they're having to expedite it just because it's a television show. There's a lot of stuff they're gonna have to cut out. But after that, Jekken seems impressed with what Arya did, so he leaves the door open, which she finally follows him down the steps into the lower depths of the House of Black and White, and we come to see there are pillars full of human faces lining the walls, and this wasn't a shock to me. I figured they were cleaning the bodies to take the skin off and use it as faces. So,
Yeah.
but he asked the question. He says, "Little girl must not be no one. Little girl must become someone." Right? It was something along those lines. What's the last thing that he says to
So
her?
my interpretation of that is that she's not ready to truly be a faceless man, but he wants her to train at being somebody else first.
Okay.
So my interpretation of that is that she's going to get to shapeshift and try it out.
Okay.
That's my interpretation.
Okay.
So she's moving on to the next step of training, basically.
Okay. She's really getting the Cliff Notes version, and he's really pushing her along. But
Yeah.
hopefully the storyline picks up. The House of Black and White has not worked for me quite as well as I'd hoped it would.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like even in the books, Arya's best stuff is the first three books because she's in the middle of the war. She loses so much. It's such an emotional 3 books of Arya just losing, losing, losing. And it's a change of pace because she goes to Bravos and now she's training. So it's basically like starting at book 1 again. Now it's more build up now. So we're waiting for payoff. I mean,
Yeah, but that's my main worry is the payoff going to be big enough for what the buildup is? Because I don't know what the end game is overall, but Arya's end game just doesn't seem like it's going to be big enough for all the time we've spent with her. So she becomes an assassin. She takes out like a Maren Trent or I don't know. Even if she got to the point of taking out like Tommen or Cersei or something like that, I just don't see how that end game is big enough for all the time we're spending along the. And maybe it's more about the journey than the destination, possibly. But the journey right now just doesn't seem worth the time that we're devoting to it.
yeah, and honestly, there's fan theories. It's very hard to tell where that plot's going. No one really has a clear perception of where her plot's going to go. Some people have predicted she's going to kill certain characters, and that it might be somebody that we don't expect. But it's just pure speculation. There's no real context clues to really outline who she's going to go after next. But I will say this: uh, George released a chapter last year. It was her latest chapter, and it was great. It was one of the best chapters like in a long time. So it was really well done, and I could see that stuff being very interesting when it comes to time to film it for the show. It's just it really steps up the pace and things get interesting again.
Well, hopefully so. I do like Arya as a character. It's just it's been a bit of a downtime for her. But I guess we'll move along into the next part of the show we'd like to discuss. And this kind of being that we didn't talk about last week on a whole, we can kind of go back to Valyria and we'll talk about Jorah and Tyrion as they travel along. So Valyria, what was the? How long ago are those ruins from? Does Martin kind of give a good indication or explanation of what Valyria was like?
He does, but a lot of it's myth and legend type stuff. Like there's no like concrete like Valyria was this. Like it's the ancestral home of the Targaryens and the other dragon families in general. It's noted. So I want to point this out first is that Valyria is largely changed from what the book Valyria is. And the way I'll explain it, and I think the showrunners kind of did a little Easter egg, like nudge, kind of tongue in cheek mention about this, is Tyrion's in the boat and he's like, he sees the ruins and he's like, this isn't the Royne. And it is the Royne. That's the Royne from the books. It's not Valyria. Like, book Valyria is totally different. So what the show did is they took the Royne and the stuff that happens on the Royne. The Royne is a river, and it's this place called the Sorrows, and they basically took they took the Sorrows and made it Valyria in the show.
Okay.
So to illustrate the difference, Valyria in the books is a very, very interesting place. No one ever sets foot there and leaves. There's nobody who's gone there and come back, apparently, or so they say. So they always talk about the Great Doom consumed Valyria, and what most people assume, like like I said, it's nothing clear cut. It's mostly like legends and stuff, and people kind of interpret it. Is that the Valyrians were heavy into like dark and blood magics, and they were doing a lot of shit they shouldn't have, like kind of things like like Mary Mazdur in season 1 when she tried to when she screwed over Daenerys with that magic.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a bunch of stuff like that, like just crazy stuff, and magic was a stronger force in the past. So what everybody kind of assumes is that they did something very wrong, and they caused a huge like volcanic eruption, and the seas were just like evaporating and people were dying, like tons of people just died. So the Targaryen ancestors, one of them had a dream about the doom of Valyria, and that's how a small group of Targaryens escaped beforehand, and that's how they kind of rose to become the most powerful dragon family and eventually take over Westeros. But I don't know. It's a really interesting place because they claim that there's demons there and that no one ever sets foot there and lives. And there's interesting like backstories. Like Tyrion has an uncle in the book named Jaerion Lannister, and he was a really cool guy. He was Tyrion's favorite uncle. He was supposedly like really friendly and adventurous, and he wanted to go on an expedition to Valyria because supposedly another Lannister had gone there with a Lannister Valyrian steel sword called Bright Roar, and he wanted to go to Valyria to find the sword and also explore it. And anyways, he goes and he never comes back. No one ever hears from him again. But it's just little interesting tales like that, and people go out of their way to sail around it, stuff like that. So in the books, more or less, you basically don't go near Valyria. So in the show, they changed it where Valyria is a place that people kind of sail through. It's okay. I mean, obviously you need to be guarded
Yeah.
and alert, but people go through it still. And they've made it a place that's basically um, a quarantine zone for people with grayscale. Um, so like I said, in the books there was a place called the Sorrows, and that's where the grayscale people were. So in the show, it's Valyria, and I think it's interesting. I like the way it was done. Uh, I kind of wish the grayscale people looked scarier because they're they're described a lot more twisted and deformed in the books. So I mean, I'm kind of disappointed the makeup wasn't better done, but
It may have, it was probably a time and budget sort of thing. I found them to be creepy, but yeah, like you said, they just looked like humans with just thicker gray skin. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it was fine. It's just a quibble of mine that it wasn't more like twisted and like cracking faces open and stuff like that. Like, so, and then there's another thing we could talk about is the combining of characters, and they're calling Jorah on the boards Jorah the Explorer because he's been combined from several characters now,
Okay.
and when he got infected by the grayscale. Well, for one, he never went through there. He never went through the Sorrows or Valyria, and so he never got grayscale in the books. That was for a character named John Cunnington, and that was that was basically who Varys sent to escort Tyrion to Daenerys. And John Cunnington, I doubt he'll ever show up in the show. He's a really interesting character, and there's a lot of backstory with him. It's really interesting, but I guess that's something we can talk about at a different time. But yeah, Jorah gets grayscale, and I kind of like it because um, we have an attachment to Jorah. You know, the friend zone master. So it gives him. I don't know. I feel like we'll feel his pain more than we would with a new character.
Yeah, I think if they, yeah, you bring it. That's a good point. If they brought in a new character and he got grayscale, I'd be like, okay, so what? Like, all right. But the fact that Jorah got grayscale in the last episode, I did feel bad for him because you know what his fate is. Granted, Stannis' daughter survived it, but you got the impression that that's the exception rather than the norm, obviously. And Stannis also went through he no stone was, no pun intended, no stone was left unturned to help his daughter get over grayscale. Jorah's not going to have that same sort of access to the right medicine, to the right people to cure himself. So it's a death sentence. And then finding out that he got grayscale, it was sort of a little punch to the gut. They ended that episode well with him looking at the episode 5, looking at the grayscale, because it was like, oh crap, his life will be coming to an end at some point.
Yeah, and they mentioned, I don't know if they're going to take it the same way they do in the books, but it's described that children get grayscale pretty often, and children are more likely to survive it. Kind of like, I guess it's like chicken pox.
Okay.
Or is that true with chicken pox? Like,
yeah. That's why parents expose children to chickenpox at a young age. I don't know why it is, but children get over it better than if you're an adult. That's why if an adult hasn't had chickenpox, they're supposed to just stay the heck away, just because it's far worse for someone who's in adulthood. So that would make sense that the comparisons would be similar.
So yeah, it is kind of similar in that way that children usually get over it easier, and it's usually fatal for adults. So yeah, I mean. So that happened, and they're traveling further. They're trying to make it to Slaver's Bay, and they encounter a slave ship, and now they're being taken as slaves. What did you have to think about that whole turn of events?
It happened so quick. Like, I don't know. Like, I was kind of shocked that it was going on, and in fact, it was sort of irritating in a way. Maybe just because I was looking forward to this sort of, just because Tyrion and Jorah were having such an interesting conversation of, the then what conversation that Tyrion had. It was very insightful. It was interesting, and I was thinking, okay, well, this is going to be a nice little companionship, a la Arya and the Hound. But then it kind of just comes to an abrupt end when slavers find them, and it's like, oh, duck down. There's a slaver ship down there. And it's like, oh no, we're here. We already found you. And I was like, oh, okay, and then.
It is kind of quick, and they just kind of move it along. I did like that they revealed to Jorah that his father died.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. When Tyrion told him that was such a great scene. Just to see the emotion on his face. He's estranged from his father, being he hadn't seen him for a while. But it was nice to see that the impact of his father's death was still, it was hard on him, and and all the emotions that were running across Ian Glenn, is the actor that plays Sir Jorah, right? He just seeing the emotions run across his face so quickly. It was a nice moment, and it was a nice callback to people who may forget that there's that family connection right there.
Mm-hmm. And I like that Tyrion holds Commander Mormont in such high regard, and that he actually brings it up. And see, that's something we don't get closure in the book, at least yet, is that no one's told Jorah his dad's dead yet. And I thought it was kind of sad. In the show, Gior, his name is Gior Mormont. That's the Lord Commander Mormont.
Yes.
His final words in the show, he basically doesn't have any final words. His final words in the books, he tells Samwell Tarly that he forgives his son, and he wants him to get that word to Jorah. And so it's an important thing because it's always looked at that Jorah dishonored his family by going into exile, and I always felt that the father and son were they respected each other a lot and they loved each other. And Jorah even left Longclaw. You know, he didn't take it with him. He left the family sword because he knew he had dishonored. So I don't know. I always liked him to get a little closure, and I'm glad that that happened in this episode.
Yeah.
I thought that was a funny comment though, where it's like they wanted to go sell Tyrion's cock to a cock merchant or something. And someone, I saw this funny comment on Reddit, and then someone made a quote. It was like, "Good thing we're a few days out from Penisport." This is so good. I thought that was so good.
Was that an exchange in the books, like the cock merchant thing?
I think so. I think it was different though. I think they did say that like the dwarf's magic is, I mean, a dwarf's cock is good in magic or something.
Okay.
So they do mention it. I just don't remember if it's in the same context.
But Tyrion did sort of save their hides pretty quickly by saying, saying that Jorah was a great fighter and to take them to the fighting pits. So
Yeah, so he's got him still on course at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, show goes on.
Indeed.
I guess so. Talk about the low point of the season.
Yes. Oh man, as you coined it, the Dornish adventure.
Yes. I'm very, very disappointed with this, and a lot of the internet is too. I've read a lot of people are just they think it's awful. The Sand Snakes in general, like the intro, like no one loved Obara's delivery. Um, and it feels like every time she talks, she has to mention she's Oberyn's daughter.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're trying to force it. And I kind of agree is that I feel that Oberyn came off so well last season, and people loved him so much that D&D wanted to work Dorne into the story more because they thought, hey, people loved Oberyn, let's put his family in, you know. And I don't know, I don't like their approach to it. The whole thing just seems so hokey. Like they sneak in one of the most important Dornish fortresses. I mean, it's not a fortress, but it's like it would be highly protected.
Sure.
You know, the Prince of Dorne, that's his refuge. Like, and they just sneak in midday. They quickly walk up to the heir of Dorne. You know, the Prince Trystane, and they get quick access to him. No guards, no issue. And in Scooby-Doo fashion, the Sand Snakes show up at the same time, and they have a little tussle. I didn't think the choreography was anything special or.
This, as I was discussing with one of my friends, this was the worst fight in the show so far. Like it was sloppy. It also only went on for like 30 seconds, and then like the cops show up and break it up. Like everything about it was just ridiculous. And the fact that Jamie struggled in the last time we saw him, he struggled to fight a downed horseman and with his one hand, and he's only saved by the fact that he put his metal hand up. And yet it's 3-on-2, and he's kind of holding his own. And these girls are supposed to be great warriors. At least that's what we were told in the crappy introduction from a couple episodes before. It just it felt forced. It felt half baked, and I don't know. I don't as a person who hasn't read the books, I've been disappointed with this whole storyline. And it started off so promising with Jamie and Bronn going off on an adventure, but what we get is it just hasn't been good so far. And on top of that, Trystane and Marcella actually love each other, so it's sort of weird that right after we're introduced to these two characters and they're professing their love for each other, Jamie shows up. It's like, come on, we got to go. It's like I don't know. It's not making any sense.
Yeah, I mean, and then Bronn gets cut, so I'm kind of concerned that he's poisoned, which could be bad news.
Oh, didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, Oberyn's daughters, I would assume they fight with poison. So we'll see how that turns out. I would not want to lose Bronn, but we'll have to see. I like that he was singing the Dornishman's Wife. It's a famous song. Well, I mean, it's one of the popular songs from the series. And Jerome Flynn used to be a singer. So, I mean, I thought it was pretty fun. Even though we didn't get the full song, but, you know.
We did get the great line where Jamie broke it up and he said, "But the ending is the best part," or something like that. The ending is the
Yeah,
important part, And I just thought it was a fun little exchange. That was the only highlight of their whole part of the episode.
yeah. It seems like the only thing that really is Jerome Flynn's performance is the only thing that really keeps that entertaining. I'm still hopeful that Doran Martell and his guard, what's his name? I can't remember his name.
I don't recall. I don't recall the name.
I'm hoping I still have hope that they're going to pull off something nice. But as far as the Sand Snakes and Ilaria Sand are concerned, I don't have any faith in their performances or how they're written at this point. I mean, we're already on episode. I mean, next week is episode 7, and we've seen nothing good from them yet.
Yeah, I can't possibly think of a payoff that would make sense that would be good.
Yeah, so I don't know. Huge disappointment for me. The lowest part of the season and perhaps the show. You agree with that?
Yeah, but the pro of that is that it can only go up from here, right?
Hopefully, hopefully. So yeah, let's move to the meat of the discussion, the Winterfell. And we got a lot of Winterfell in episode 5. Lots of Bolton and Sansa interaction. She was reintroduced to Reek. In episode 5. Was that episode 5 where she was brought to the kennels and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It was last week that we did see her interaction with Theon. I did not expect first before we get into that, Sansa is sort of intimidated by Miranda. Miranda attempts to intimidate Sansa with the bath scene. And we do get sort of this one moment of defiance by Sansa. We haven't had many of those, but she says, I'm in my home, and you cannot frighten me in my home," and basically dismisses Miranda. But we do see even though Sansa shows a good, she puts up a good show, she is more aware of how horrible Ramsay can be, just because Miranda, warns her to don't be boring, because only bad things happen when one becomes boring to Ramsay.
Yeah, and so yeah, this is the big scene that a lot of people were when people learned, like the promotion photos came out earlier in the year, and people saw pictures of Sansa and Winterfell. Everybody was like, all of a sudden, we were just like, oh shit, she's gonna take the place of Jane Poole. That's what everybody kind of assumed, the book readers at least, that she's gonna be put in the position to marry Ramsay, perhaps. And the way it played out like that, and the next question was, does she get raped by Ramsay? Does she have a bad wedding night like Jane Poole? And the answer is yes. She takes that part of Jane's story. It's Sansa's character taking in that part of Jane's character. Obviously, I'll say it in the books, Sansa is still a virgin. She has not, no one's touched her yet. And so, yeah, I mean, this is very controversial on the internet. There's a lot of people making a lot of noise over this. It bothers a lot of people. I'll say this, like, it's probably not a popular opinion on the internet, but I think it was I think it was as well done and tactfully done as it could have been, especially considering that Jane Poole, who is, the opposite of Sansa in the books, her wedding night is much, much worse. And I can go into details, basically, and I don't think it would have been filmable. They couldn't show it on TV because she gets raped. But first, Ramsay has Reek participate, and Reek has a disgusting, like, diseased mouth, so he goes down on her to get her prepared, and then more goes on. Like, it doesn't all happen in one night, but it's implied.
And we don't necessarily have to go into great detail of what occurs.
Yeah.
But needless to say, from what you've told me, as we discussed off camera last week, what Ramsey does to Jake Poole sounds far worse than what happened this week. That's not to defend. It's not to defend the portrayal of what happens, but like you said, I think the most controversy I've heard about it is not so much the rape scene itself, is that I think people are tired of Sansa being the victim.
Yeah, yeah.
I think people are wanting to see her turn the tide, and I think in this scene, I think somebody had told me that they'd hoped that she would somehow stab Ramsey in the process, or Theon would regrow a pair and take him down. But that's not what I read this scene happening. Yes, I wanted that to happen. Yes, I didn't want Sansa to be hurt. I did not want that to happen. And that's what made and it happens off camera, but that's what made hearing it happen hurt that much worse, just because Sansa is such a tragic character, and you don't want to see this happen to her. And yes, I wanted to see Theon charge, but at the same time, that's not where his character's at. This is
he's
a character
not,
to be.
He's not at that point yet.
No, this is a character at the beginning of the episode who begs Sansa to take his arm because he fears what Ramsey will do to him if she doesn't walk in to the wedding with locked arms with Theon. Mm-hmm. And yes, part of the rejection is the hurt of the fact that this is a girl who once trusted him as a ward to her father, but also there's a definite fear of Ramsey. And I feel that and this is, people have read it, that Theon was the way that with them ending up with Theon's face, it shows him as more of the victim. I didn't read it as that. I read it as this is something horrific that you do not want to see as an audience member, and Theon is basically our vessel from standing in the room.
His performance, it really gives you that uncomfortable feeling too. I think it's very successful that just showing his face instead of the actual rape conveys just how bad that scene is, you know?
Yeah, and also the reason why he can't charge Ramsey in that moment is because everything that we've seen, that Theon has seen through the show up to this point, has either been done to him or the people that are not close to him, or people that we don't really know. We saw the girl hunted. We've seen other, we know that Ramsey is a despicable person, but this is the first time he has seen somebody who was once close to being hurt by Ramsey. And so I think it has to hit him, and it has to sort of boil inside him that Ramsey is capable of hurting people he cares about. And I do hope that Theon does get his redemption and can help Sansa. Unfortunately, her wedding night had to go down as it did. And I feel there is a bigger we use endgame term. I use the endgame term a lot, but I feel like the endgame is going to be bigger because of this, or at least I hope so. I hope this wasn't a wasted, audibly violent scene for the sake of just having the shock value. My faith is that this is going to build to something bigger, and will make Ramsey's demise that much sweeter.
The thing is, it builds Ramsey to be the most despicable villain in the show, period. Like, he takes it a step further than Joffrey. And I feel like that's the intended point of the Ramsey character, is you had Joffrey and you despised him, and it was an excellent character. And then George Martin creates this other character, Ramsey, and you need to hate Ramsey. You need to hate this guy. And yeah, Sansa got raped, and that doesn't happen in the books, but he rapes another girl, and you still feel anger towards this guy for doing it. And I don't know, I just feel like there was no other outcome to this situation without becoming outrageous or like stupidly written. Like you said, Theon is too broken to challenge Ramsey right now.
Yeah, or another option, somebody had said they'd hope that Brienne would come charging in. I'm like, that you can't have, because why would because she said light a candle in the broken tower. Why would Sansa, before her wedding, she is aware that Ramsey is a bad person, but she is hoping that she can be, I'm sure there's some sort of, not that she's naive, but I think she is hoping that nothing bad is going to happen to her on her wedding night of all nights, So I don't think she's going to preemptively go light a candle in the broken tower. when she doesn't even really know who told her to go light the candle in the broken tower, you know?
Yeah.
So if Brienne came barging in at the right moment just to stop Ramsay, it would be pretty hokey.
It would be, and I like the comment I read on Reddit too. That people they wanted her to bust in like the Kool-Aid man, and it would have been so, I don't know, it would have felt so like inserted, and I don't know, it would have broken the tension of the scene.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Like Brienne kills Ramsay, and then what? Like then what's the whole point of the Winterfell arc? Like
Yeah.
if Ramsay's dead, I don't know. There's a way that things are going to play out. I have faith that it's gonna pay off. And I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like rape is the hot topic. I don't know why rape is a horrible thing, and it is a horrible thing. I don't understand why people have been watching Game of Thrones for 5 years, a show that's reputable for doing violent, sexual, crazy things, and people have been getting raped in multiple episodes. We had a gang rape at Craster's Keep last season, Weekend at Craster's.
Yeah.
And then we had the misinterpreted Cersei Jaime rape. People have threatened to rape Arya several times. Daenerys's first sex scene in the first episode was portrayed as a rape in the show. It's a show. I mean, that's what this universe is based on. It's a dangerous world where people are not safe, and that includes women. I mean, women are in a bad position. If you're a woman, you probably don't want to live in Westeros. I mean, it's just a bad place, and I don't know. I just don't understand why this is what upsets people. It was an off. I don't know. I don't understand why it has to be a huge controversy and people want to call for D&D's jobs, or like there's people who are upset by it. It's just like, oh, that was a harsh scene to watch, and that's understandable. But then there's the outrageous people who are calling for people's jobs and saying that the patriarchy is a puppet master of Game of Thrones or some stupid shit, and people are going after George Martin for this shit too. And I'm just like, it's taking it too far.
Yeah, and it's storytelling. I will say I will be upset if the payoff is not, if the payoff doesn't justify what happened. Like if this was just a violent sex act for a violent sex act's sake. That's a really hard thing to say. But I do have faith that this is playing out to be something bigger. It is unfortunate that Sansa has to continue to be a victim, but up to this point, I haven't seen the opportune moment for her to turn the tide. And I'm hoping this is what causes her to turn the tide, because Ramsay violently took something from her that she can't get back, And I'm hoping that will be, as sad as it sounds, that has to be what it is. That had to be the event that does it. I'm hoping that now we will see Sansa, turn the tide, or now we will see Sansa, get her revenge, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it builds character. I mean, like, people root for the good guy, and if a good guy is a victim, I mean, most of our characters are victims. Arya is a huge victim. Jaime's a victim. He had his hand cut off, and now he's in a kind of redemption arc. I mean, you have people lose things. It's part of a story. People need to lose something and come back from it, or they learn something as a character. And rape's an unfortunate thing to go through, but I feel like Sansa's going to come out stronger. I feel like she's going to be angry, and I feel like it's going to give her motive to do stuff. That's what I feel. I feel like she's going to, I think that's the moment she realizes, they're right. I'm in a bad place. I need to do something about this, and I think she's going to do something. I think she's going to motivate, and she's going to start doing stuff to get out of the situation. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I do believe that Ramsay is going to pay the price for everything he has done so far. I mean, my hope is that Ramsay will pay the price for everything he's done so far. I know the show doesn't always play to your expectations, but I have faith that Ramsay will get what he deserves.
Manus is coming, man.
Yeah, this is true. And if not that Manus would know, but if Manus were to find out that Ramsay did such a heinous act, I'm not sure that Manus would be so kind in his deliverance of punishment.
Oh man, I can't wait to see what happens, man. Like I said, it's something that's not resolved in the books yet. So I'm really curious to see what happens when Manus comes. That's all I gotta say. Because he's a man who dispenses justice.
Yeah, and after I jumped on the Stannis bandwagon last week, it was a little disappointing that we didn't get a little bit more from him this week. Now I just want to see more of him. I'm looking forward to next week when we will get some more of Stannis the Manus because he's pretty badass. Brian,
Yeah,
it was worth the wait.
yeah. There's a distinct lack of Manus this episode, so we'll have to make up for it next week.
0% Manus is unacceptable
Yeah. You need at least a 5-10% at least,
at the very least.
at the very least. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a controversial episode, for a lot of reasons. The rape scene, the way that Dorne is being handled, it just felt like a low point in the season.
Yeah, and especially after last season where every episode was strong, I think it's easy to forget that the early seasons did have their peaks and valleys. So we've hit the first valley of this season, and hopefully it's not a long, prolonged valley. Hopefully it picks right back up next week.
Yeah, I mean, and we're approaching this. We are in the second half, so we should expect the budget to hit. Like the next several episodes should be budget intensive, and we should expect some big payoff for the season for at least several of these plot points. But yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we close out?
No, sometimes I make a prediction, but at this point, I don't really know. I don't have any predictions right now that are worth a damn. But yeah, I'm looking forward to next week's episode, and hopefully like I said, hopefully it picks back up.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, guys, thanks for watching. And if you liked what you saw, follow us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/altness. We usually try and do one of these for every episode of Game of Thrones, but we missed two this year. I was sick one day. I think I was sick both times. I don't know. It's been a bad year for my health. So, yeah, hopefully we should be back next week. And especially because these next few episodes, I'm expecting big things. So, should be a lot to talk about. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Have a good week.